to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights. And I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, please like and subscribe and click on the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, please comment in the comment section with anything that you would care to share on the topic or ideas for future videos that you would like to see me do. And also, if you're interested in a personal reading, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics in natal astrology as well as relationship astrology. Check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. And also, last but not least, I've also started a tarot channel more recently than this one, and I will be linking it in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. So if you are interested in tarot, go ahead and check it out. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, so today's topic is going to be on Arudha Lagna versus Lagna. And I mean, I kept thinking about this topic. As you can see, I have postponed it for a long time, also because my ADHD has been all over the place and I've been taking medication in the past, I don't know how many months, whatever. Won't get into it, but I kept thinking about how I should organize this video, and to be honest, it's such a complex topic that I don't know, it's like no matter how I would do it, there would be more to say about it. And basically, the main thing that I want to talk about is the difference. I want to point out that there is a difference between the Arudha Lagna, as in the energy that people see about you, like the energy, the first things that people associate you with, let me put it like that, and your physical appearance, and how this is illustrated in the horoscope. So let me start with the actual physical appearance. So I'm talking here about, the body, facial features, literally everything that has to do with your physical appearance. You probably have heard me say this in multiple videos, that it is influenced by your horoscope. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's not true. You know, I inherited my mother's eyes and my father's legs and stuff like that. And that is also true, right? I'm not trying to say that astrology replaces genetics or anything like that. But, everybody has a gene pool. That's basically what astrology is saying. So the gene pool is what you have available, let's say, in your options with respect to your features. And of course, the ambulance has to pass by. Like, I swear to God, I haven't heard an ambulance so loud in at least a couple of weeks. And now I start recording this. Anyway, I'm just gonna shut up because they're doing their job and they're saving lives. All right. Anyway, so where was I? Basically, what I'm trying to say is that everyone has a gene pool, right? So you have your genes, your options, your variety of features that you can inherit from your family based on your genetic inheritance. But your astrological influences, as shown by the D1 chart, especially the Lagna and also the other planets, but especially the Lagna, right? The ascendant is the most important factor in determining what features you're going to have, what genes you're going to inherit. But also the D9 chart and the Lagna in the D9 chart, right? This is the part that I don't think I've mentioned so much in other videos, or maybe I haven't mentioned it at all. But it definitely has become more and more obvious to me in the past few years that the Lagna in the D9 and everything that influences the Lagna in the D9 also very much plays a part in your physical appearance. Especially, actually, it's relevant to see how you might develop after marriage or after the age of 35, because that's when the Navamsa becomes most active. However, I would say that the Navamsa definitely shows your physical appearance as well, because think about it this way, the Navamsa is basically like a more refined, let's say, under the microscope, let's say, maybe not microscope, but under a magnifying glass, right? It's like putting your D1 chart under a magnifying glass. So it's going to show you things much more in detail. That's what the Navamsa does. And so there's this is the part that decides, the Navamsa and the D1 chart, especially with the Lagna and other planets as well, will decide what kind of features you're going to inherit from your gene pool. Like, are you going to be towards are you going to inherit the blue eyes of the family? Are you going to inherit the dark eyes of the family? Right? Are you going to be towards the more tanned skin color of your family inheritance? Are you going to be to the lighter skin color of your family inheritance? Stuff like that. What hair color? How is your hair going to be? Is it going to be wavy, straight? What height you're going to inherit? The body type and all this stuff, right? These things are very much influenced by astrology. And I have also mentioned this, I'm pretty sure, definitely in the community tab at some point. Back in the, I think 2009 or 2010, when I was into tropical astrology, there was this, I used to be into this website that was called astrofaces.com. I'm not sure if they're still around. I think they are. I haven't checked in a long time. And they conducted an experiment where they basically would collect pictures from people all over the world that they would organize based on sun placement, ascendant placement, and moon placement. Now, granted, these were tropical placements. However, if you know, the difference between tropical and sidereal is something like 23 degrees and 40 minutes, depending on what calculations you use, but it's about 23, 24 degrees. So basically, if you have a planet in a certain sign in the tropical zodiac, it's actually very likely that you're going to have a planet in that sign in the sidereal zodiac as well, right? So basically, a planet has to be above 23 degrees and 40 minutes in a sign in the tropical zodiac in order to stay, scratch that, because it has to be above 23 degrees. In any case, what I was trying to say is they're not going to stay in the same sign, but the people are going to have the same placements. That's what I was trying to say. So they're not going to stay in the same sign, because basically, if a planet is above 23 degrees and 40 minutes in a sign in tropical, then it will be in the same sign in sidereal. However, since it's 23 degrees and 40 minutes in tropical, that's the difference between the sidereal and the tropical. If you take two people who have, a planet in the same sign, so let's say you take a person who has Sun in Aries in 15 degrees tropical and a person who has Sun in Aries in 21 degrees tropical, they're both going to be Sun in Pisces, actually in sidereal. That's what I was trying to say. So basically, there's a greater probability that these people are going to have the same sun placements, the same moon placements, right? And there might be small variations, of course, because once you cross above 23 degrees and 40 minutes, then it switches into the other sign in sidereal, right? So, but the bottom line is, right, there are these people, so they're a collection of photographs from people from around the world, and they organize them in order of ascendant, moon, and sun, and people often had very similar features, or at least they conveyed very similar energies. So, in any case, this is just to give you an introduction, especially if you are new to astrology and you don't know much about, the way that astrology can influence physical appearance. Yeah, check out the maybe Astrofaces. Also, there are other websites now that I cannot name any, but I'm pretty sure that if you search, I have come across, for instance, blog posts that collect, show you, let's say, celebrities. And this is also why I use a lot of celebrities or famous people examples in my in my videos. It's to illustrate how there are so many parallels between people who have similar configurations, right? So I have seen, for instance, people who put together collages of, let's say, famous people who have sun in the same nakshatra or ascendant in the same nakshatra. So for those of you who don't know, nakshatra is the lunar mansion. So it's actually something that is independent of the sidereal or the tropical zodiac. It's overlapping with the zodiac. That's what I'm trying to say. So independent in the sense that you can calculate your nakshatra based on tropical or sidereal, because they are based on, constellations in the sky. So, long rant. I think maybe it's obvious to, I think to a trained eye, it would be obvious that I'm trying to wean off Xanax. I have been trying to wean off Xanax for, slowly, not wean off, taper off, and for, a few days. And my anxiety has been starting to get up, and, plus I'm having annoying side effects, like sneezing and runny nose more than usual, and I don't know, a whole bunch of it's really weird. I'm becoming more agitated is what I'm trying to say. In any case, I digress. So this is what I wanted to say about just a general introduction actually on this topic of how astrology influences your physical appearance. But to get into more specific placements and how astrology, which parts of your horoscope are the most important, what to look for. Well, of course, the Lagna, placement in sign, placement in nakshatra, very important in determining your overall energy and your physical appearance. Also, the Lagna Lord, any aspects to the Lagna, what planets are looking at the Lagna, maybe planets conjunct the Lagna Lord. These are very important influences with respect to your physical appearance. Then, of course, aspects of planets to the Lagna Lord, right? So not just conjunction, but also other aspects, more minor aspects. In Vedic astrology, of course, you're talking about special aspects. So, these are all going to influence. Then each planet kind of governs a certain part of the body. So the moon governs the face. The second house governs the face. For instance, the moon also governs the chest area. So, for instance, in a woman's chart, the moon is a good indicator of what kind of a boob you're going to have. Pardon my directness. But basically, yes. What are you going to be big-chested? Are you going to be flat-chested? General shape, the general energies that your breast area is conveying. And then you have Mars, for instance, is about muscle mass, so Mars is actually really important because it's a natural ruler of the first house of the ascendant. So irrespective of what your ascendant is, Mars is also going to play a very important part in determining your body type, your overall body type. So I've actually seen this a lot, for instance, when Mars is in air signs, you oftentimes see a more a person who tends to be more slim, or they look their best when they're very slim, so they have, also you tend to see, for instance, with Aquarius or a Capricorn, people who are tall, towards the tall side, tall and slim side, right? Jupiter also towards the tall side, but they could also have tendency to gain weight. If you have Mars in water signs, those are the people who have probably the strongest tendency to put on weight. And then you also have to look at aspects, of course, because if you have, let's say, Mars in Pisces and it's conjunct Saturn, that is probably going to make you tall and lanky. Not so much, short and plump as Pisces would initially suggest. So all kinds of things, right? So there are all kinds of things that can influence this. But mainly when I look at, horoscopes to understand the energy of a person, I'm looking at the Lagna, planets in the Lagna, very strong influence. Planets conjunct the Lagna Lord, very strong influence. Nakshatra of the Lagna and sign of the Lagna, very important influences. And then I also look at second house, planets in the second house. That shows the face. What kind of features are you going to have? I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I have noticed, for instance, I think I have mentioned right when I did Mars in the second house, that, for instance, Mars in the second house will tend to give masculine facial features. So even when you look at women who have Mars in the second house, they will tend to have eyes that are towards the smaller size, and they kind of have eyes that are really sharp and penetrating. They can also have well-defined jawlines, squarish jawlines, even if they're women. Prominent nose as well, because that's a Mars characteristic. And they can also struggle with a tendency towards baldness sometimes, depending on whether it is, afflicted or not. Also, his sun is in the second house, same thing, Then let me think. If you have, Venus in the second house, most likely very pretty face, full lips, nice eyes, nice skin, high cheekbones usually. Also, it's really important. Again, this is why I always say depends a lot on what else is happening in the whole full horoscope. Because you could have like, let's say if you have Saturn in let's say Mula Nakshatra, it's going to be in the second house. I mean, it's going to be very different from having Saturn in, let's say Bharani Nakshatra in the second house, very different influences. So depending on what planets are influencing there, it's going to be more or less beneficial, let's say. Let me see, what else? For instance, the sun is interesting because the sun is actually more about the energy that you convey. So the sun is the natural Atmakarka of everyone, basically. It's the soul's purpose. So the sun gives you your general vitality, your energy, so what kind of energy you convey. So it's not so much about actual physical features as far as I've seen, but it's more like what is coming off of you. It's like, are you intense? Are you relaxed? Are you, do you have, let's say, dreamy eyes? Do you have more intense eyes? How is your facial mimicry and your muscles? How do you express yourself? Stuff like that can be shown by the sun. And let me think, what else is... Yeah, but basically every planet governs a body part is what I'm trying to say. But with respect to physical appearance, with respect to specifically, let's say, feminine beauty, you want to also look at Venus. What is Venus doing in that horoscope? Is Venus in a healthy place? Is Venus conjunct a certain planet? Is it conjunct the Lord of the Ascendant? Is it exalted? Because Venus can show your powers of seduction. So automatically, if you have a strong Venus, you're going to tend towards attractiveness. However, with Venus, it doesn't really specify if it's going to be like a natural attractiveness or if it's going to be something cultivated. Because if it's just the Venus that is strong, it just shows that you have this great ability to be charming. But how you become charming is determined by the rest of your horoscope. Obviously, for instance, some of the best looking people that you're ever going to come across have Venus in the first house. In fact, especially, I've talked about this also a little bit in the video I did about narcissism, that women with Venus in the first house, I mean, I have seen it a lot at least. I'm not saying that it's 100%. Of course, always look at the full horoscope. But Venus in the first house in a woman's chart does bring narcissistic tendencies because Venus is love and the first house is the house of the self. And especially in a woman's chart, it brings a love of self and a love of their appearance. And I say especially in a woman's chart because it's also because society prizes beautiful women or beauty in women a lot more than it does in men. But actually, if you pay attention, men with Venus in the first house also are very, how should I put it? Usually they're very good looking and they're usually very conscious of that. They know how to use their powers of seduction. Just to give you a couple of examples that I can think of, Jude Law, I know that I'm pretty sure that he has Venus in the first house, or he has Venus strongly aspecting the first house. Also, another very good looking guy who had Venus in the first house was, I can't remember his name. Alain Delon, right. Yes, Alain Delon, he had Venus in the first house. And he was like, and in any case, Venus also shows that you bring this attraction. You attract people with your energy, right? You're very seductive. And of course, when it comes to women, I mean, if you look at the list of famous actresses, for instance, who had Venus in the first house, many of them, were known as sex symbols, or they were known as great beauties, I could just think of, like, let's say Cameron Diaz, Lauren Bacall, and let me think, who else? Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie is a great example because she has Venus in the first house. also in the Navamsa, in the D1 and the D9 charts. So clearly she was meant to be very good looking in this lifetime. Another example is, let me think, who has Venus in the first house? I can't think right now, but there are many of them. Many, many, many. There's nothing that just comes up right now. But also, most importantly, and this is something that I'm going to get a little bit more into detail as I go along, is that it's interesting to see the difference between planets in the Arudha Lagna and planets in the Lagna. I'm gonna get a little bit more into detail as I go along, because planets in the Lagna actually shape your physical appearance, right? So for instance, people who have another example of maybe not a famous celebrity, but someone who is quite well known, is Teal Swan. Teal Swan has Venus conjunct Ketu in the Lagna. I think also conjunct something else. I don't remember exactly, but she has Venus in the Lagna. So she's a very beautiful woman and definitely attracts attention because of that. However, if you look at her Lagna is in Aries and it's opposite Mars and Saturn. So the first thing that people know about her or how they recognize her is actually not necessarily as a beauty queen, right? Those are not the first things that people associate her with. Instead, they associate her with controversy and kind of being a pioneer, being unique, right? Which is in line with having your Arudha Lagna in Aries. All right, I have to pause and continue. All right, back. Another thing I wanted to say, where was I? Yeah, right, about the different energies, right, that come off. This is the main reason I wanted to make this video. It's to illustrate the fact that, and to say that, the physical appearance is determined by the ascendant in the D1 and the D9, mainly, also the other planets, but mainly the ascendant. And then Arudha Lagna, which I have talked about in many videos, you can search my channel, but just to give you briefly an introduction for those who don't know, it is a ascendant. Arudha Lagna literally means Arudha ascendant, and it means that it's a point that is calculated based on your actual ascendant from the D1 chart, and it shows the way that other people perceive you. I have talked about it really quite in a lot of detail in many videos. I've also done a series where I talked about each sign as Arudha Lagna and what it means and how people perceive you. I also used example of famous people. So I am probably going to be linking those videos or that series in the video description, so go check it out if you're interested. But basically, Arudha Lagna is what people project on you, right? As I have explained in those series. So it's really interesting to see, though, that people's projections can be so strong that they actually become the main thing that you are known for, instead of your, appearance, or even sometimes your actual qualities. In fact, most of the times, right? That's why the Arudha Lagna is so important, because it's almost determining what you are allowed to do in this life and what not. Not directly, it's not like people are gonna put obstacles in your face if you have the wrong Arudha Lagna, but as I explained in many of the videos, especially the ones where I got in depth with each sign as Arudha Lagna, you have certain things, certain, let's say, professions that are associated with your Arudha Lagna that are going to be seen as more favorable for you to get into. So society is going to be more supportive of you getting into a professional line that is in line with your Arudha Lagna. So basically with the energy that you are projecting. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Jesus, I don't know what is going on outside. So now there are cars honking. Anyway, back to my video. See, it's like I'm getting a lot of obstacles in the path of this video for some reason. I don't know. And Saturn has really been affecting me with its transits. I'm actually going to probably be making a shorter video on Saturn's transits and what to watch out for in maybe a few days, within a week or so. So anyway, what I was trying to say is that your Arudha Lagna determines how people project on you, right? So For instance, let's say, and like I have used the example of Teal Swan, for instance, let's think of Marilyn Monroe, for instance. Marilyn Monroe is interesting because I think her ascendant was in Cancer, right? So if you thought, I mean, also, yes, there was something in her energy that was seductive, and that's because she had Moon in Ashlesha in the D9 chart. And she had some, characteristics in her ascendant depicted by her horoscope as well that pointed towards being pretty, having pretty features, right? But not necessarily to the extent where you would think, oh my God, this person's going to become a sex symbol who is going to become immortalized, right? And this can actually be explained by her Arudha Lagna a lot more. She had Arudha Lagna in Aries with Venus in the Arudha Lagna. And Venus in the Arudha Lagna shows that people project on you, especially if it's not together with a malefic in her, like it was in her case. So it wasn't like conjunct Saturn or Mars. It gives off this very kind of siren sort of image, a person who would do well in the arts, a person who is very seductive, very beautiful. So it's like for her, having Venus in the Arudha Lagna, it means that that is the main energy that comes forward when a person meets her or when they look at her. That is the main energy that basically the universe or the matrix or whatever you want to call it will allow people to project on her, right? So she was definitely fantasized about, and she was, even lusted after and all that. And she definitely played on that because, as I have also said in many videos, the people who are the most successful oftentimes are people who learn how to play on the qualities of the Arudha Lagna. In other words, especially if they want to be, let's say, a public figure, right? Like an actor, a singer, whatever, where you have your image matters a great deal, or a model, right? Or in any profession, actually, you will find out that the Arudha Lagna basically can help you a great deal if you know how to use it to your advantage, right? Because if you have Venus in the first house and you try to be a neurosurgeon, for instance, you're going to come across a lot of obstacles, most likely, depending on what else is happening in that Arudha Lagna. But you're probably going to come across a lot of obstacles because people have a hard time seeing you as a neurosurgeon. Can you imagine Marilyn Monroe as a neurosurgeon? And I'm not even talking about Marilyn Monroe when she was, at her most decorated and, glamorized and with her hair dyed and wearing push-up bras. And I'm talking even when she was, in her natural state, when she was younger, she was very attractive, right? So because she was so attractive, very many people would have seen her as, a great intellectual, let's say. That's really the sad reality, and it's messed up. And one of the reasons, and it's not something, in my opinion, that cannot be changed, but unless people become aware of these tendencies, society is not going to change. Basically, the way that the world is right now, it's like your image influences your options in life a great deal. Because if you have, like I said, so like in this example, or let's say, for instance, if you have, let's say, Saturn in the Arudha Lagna, people will automatically see you as mature, serious, good at things like organizing, administrating, working in the background maybe. They will also maybe see you as kind of like a natural servant for other people, right? Someone who is quite selfless. Now, whether that is true or not depends. And of course, it also depends on the sign and what other planets are there, because Saturn can also make you come across as very stern, very cold, unemotional, right? So you could be yourself. You could be a very emotional person, especially if your horoscope suggests otherwise. But because you have Saturn in the Arudha Lagna, people will project kind of like their fears on you, They will see you as this very tough, unemotional person. So Saturn in the first house of the Arudha Lagna, for instance, would not be great for an actor, let's say, or a singer, unless there are other influences that really counteract this, right? Because it wouldn't be great because people are just not going to see a Saturn dominant person as someone who's, first of all, they're not even going to see their emotions, right? They're going to project the fact that they see this person as, very stern and very serious and stoic and, in control of themselves and their emotions. So it's going to be really difficult for them to to break through in, let's say, an artistic field. Depending, like I said, depending on what else is going on there. Maybe if they have Venus in the 10th house from the Arudha Lagna, maybe that's a different thing. Or if they have the Arudha Lagna of the 5th house conjunct their Saturn in the Arudha Lagna, that's another issue as well. So there could be variations, but giving you general information here, general tendencies, right? And what else did I want to say? Yeah, it's really interesting, especially, and this really dawned on me when I looked at the differences between, let's say, people who had Venus in the ascendant of the D1 or the D9 versus people who have Venus in Arudha Lagna. And you actually more often see that Venus in the Arudha Lagna is the one that makes people see the person in question as very much attractive, especially if this is a woman and you have Venus in the Arudha Lagna, you're going to be basically fantasized about, right? It's like people are going to see you as kind of a siren, more glamorous. They're going to easily see you as, an artist, someone who for a singer, for instance, anyone who works in an artistic field. But they're going to also, especially as a woman, you are at risk of being objectified, just like Marilyn Monroe was. Another famous woman who has Venus in the first house of the Arudha Lagna is Jennifer Lopez. And she's also quite interesting because the rest of her horoscope, right, the D1, suggests a rather tough person. And she does have that kind of a tough energy as well, especially her moon being conjunct Mars in Scorpio. But because of her Arudha Lagna, containing Venus, so obviously, again, she has been favored in a musical career, which is very much signified by Venus. And arts in general, also acting, because she was also into acting. And she was also, and she still is, being talked about for how beautiful she is, right? Also because she works a lot on her appearance, but people have always talked about what a great figure she had, what, how beautiful, how nice her skin is. Now they're talking about how young she looks and all this stuff. So that's all coming from having Venus in the Arudha Lagna, right? So even if you don't have a strong Venus in the D1, not connected to your appearance, you can come across as very seductive and very beautiful if you have a strong Venus in the Arudha Lagna, especially if it's in the Arudha Lagna or in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna, right? So looking at the Arudha Lagna. And yeah. So now I would like to look at a couple of examples. I would have liked to tackle a lot more examples, but honestly, I just didn't have the time to get into it. And this is a topic, like I said in the beginning, that I could talk about for ages because there's so much to be said, and I could, break it down into categories. How do you look at Venus in the Arudha Lagna versus Venus in the Lagna, Saturn in the Lagna versus Saturn in the Arudha Lagna, etc., etc. How, the D1 Lagna influences appearance versus the D9 in different examples. So I could talk about it for a long time. Instead, I decided to take an example that I think is really interesting because I'm going to be looking at basically similar energies, two actresses with similar energies, but for one of them, the same energies will play out in the Arudha Lagna, whereas for another will play out in the regular Lagna, and I'm going to point out the differences. So first of all, I want to start with Vivien Leigh. Now, you probably have heard about Vivien Leigh. She was a famous actress from old Hollywood. She was probably most famous for playing Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, which was, I think, and even is to this day, the most profitable movie of all time. And I think it was, it won tons of Oscars. So the movie came out, I think, in 1945, 1946, something like that. Was it during the war or right after the war? I don't remember. Or in 1939, I don't even remember. It was somewhere around those days. It was a very long time ago, but it's still one of the most successful films of all time. And Vivien Leigh at the time was really well known. She was very respected as an actress, but she was also known as one of the great beauties of her day. And I think her chart is particularly interesting because she was born in 1913. That's a very long time ago, basically. And she was part of a generation of actors that didn't get plastic surgery, which is very rare to find nowadays. So she was basically a natural beauty. So it's particularly interesting to study how different aspects play out with respect to her appearance in her horoscope. So let me get into it. So first of all, I'm going to look at her Lagna situation, basically. So her Lagna situation is, you can't really see this on the chart that I'm about to show you on the screen. By the way, this is an Indian style chart, North Indian style chart, which means that the numbers are the signs and they are in order. So 1 is Aries, 2 is Taurus, 3 is Gemini, and so on and so forth until number 12, which is Pisces. And the first square in the middle top there is the ascendant, and then they go in order, counterclockwise, I think it is. And also accidentally, I forgot to take Neptune and Pluto and Uranus, and I think that's about it. I forgot to, check them out of the calculator because I won't be looking at them. I don't use the outer planets much, except Pluto every now and then, but I won't be looking at that now. However, what I wanted to say is you cannot see this in this chart, but she had ascendant in Bharani Nakshatra, which is ruled by Venus. I have talked about Bharani in depth in the video that I did called Nakshatras of Venus, or Venus's Nakshatras. And basically, already by being one of the Venus-ruled nakshatras, it means that this person is going to be above average good looking. And her ascendant in Bharani was probably one of the main factors that made her very attractive. And already having an ascendant that is influenced by Venus means that you're probably going to inherit some of the better genes of your gene pool, basically. And she was very famously exotic. She came from an exotic background. I heard that her background was even, I think, part Indian and Armenian and potentially Spanish and a bunch of other, ethnicities. Now, it's not sure exactly how much of those she inherited, but probably she was an interesting mixture of different genes that, mixed well and turned her appearance into a very unique, very exotic sort of beauty. And so on the one hand, she has ascendant in Bharani, and then her ascendant is in Aries, which is ruled by Mars and Ketu. Sorry, it's ruled by Mars. If it would have been Scorpio, it would have been Mars and Ketu. But it's ruled by Mars, and ascendant in Aries can explain her high cheekbones, that very, very prominent appearance, like basically a kind of appearance that really stands out, because Aries is about, being assertive, kind of this energy of look at me, they want to be the first, they want to be the best. And Aries in Bharani particularly makes for a really good looking person, generally. I'm not going to name you just like some of the most famous people who have Bharani placements, but just off the top of my head, let me think. Also, what's his name again? Pedro Pascal, I think. This time, I hope that I got it right, because I tried to name him in another video. Anyway, he also has Venus in Bharani. Let me think. Lana Del Rey has Venus and Rahu in Bharani conjunct in the 7th house. And I'm pretty sure that Greta Garbo had Moon in Bharani. There are a bunch of people who are very good looking who had prominent Bharani placements. Halle Berry, I think, has ascendant in Bharani as well. So basically, it gives a kind of a really kind of sultry, but at the same time, very strong appearance, like strong features, distinguishable features. And so she already has that in her corner off the get-go because she inherited the really good, genes of her gene pool. But aside from that, let me look at another interesting factor. So she has Ketu in the fifth house, which can I just say, and as you can see, I pointed out her Arudha Lagna falls there as well. So her Arudha Lagna is in Leo, and Ketu falls in her Arudha Lagna. But I will be getting to that towards the end. But if you look at her horoscope, right, she has Ketu in the fifth house, and it's aspecting basically her ascendant by ninth aspect. So this explains the pale complexion. Now, obviously, if she had been from a different racial background, different ethnicity, if she didn't have, the gene pool to produce very pale skin, she probably wouldn't have had such pale skin, right? Because there would be nothing to get that from genetically. But Ketu influencing the Lagna will make a person inherit the paler complexion, generally, as far as I have seen. I have actually talked about this more in detail in a video I made a while ago that I called Archetypes of Ketu, and talked about Ketuvians and people who are very influenced by Ketu in general. So you can go check that out if you're curious to hear more about it. But basically, yes, so having Ketu aspecting her Lagna already means that she's going to inherit the more pale complexion, right? And I'm talking for now about her actual Lagna in the D1 chart. Another thing is that if you can look at this, so she was famous for being very good looking. Some of the qualities that she was famous for physically was the fact that she was very pale, that she had very beautiful eyes, that she had a cat-like smile, and very good bone structure. And in fact, I'm not going to get into this, philosophy now, but many of the actors who are nowadays very successful, and in fact, not just nowadays, but since the beginning of cinema, right? Because cinema developed basically along the age of Aquarius. So this is an entire philosophy in of itself, but the reason why Saturnians and Rahuvians are the ones who are the most popular, the most attractive, the most sought after to some extent is, number one, because we are in the age of Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn and Rahu, which means that people who have these energies prominently placed, especially connected to their appearance, will fall in line with the beauty trends of the world, right? So that's one aspect. Another aspect is the fact that, because of the development of cameras and, movie techniques, it's really important in order for someone to be photogenic, telegenic, to look good on camera, they have to have very good bone structure. And what is good bone structure? It means strong Saturn. Strong Saturn, and then there's also the uniqueness, right? Actors stand out because they are unique, because they have something unusual, right? Those are the people who are the most successful and famous and all that. I could also talk a little bit about Angelina Jolie. Maybe I will add that at the end, but let me stick to Vivien Leigh here. But yes, so good bone structure is very important, and she was known for having great bone structure. She had, high cheekbones, very defined bone structure. So she was very slim as well, which is a thing because the camera supposedly adds pounds, right? So you want to have a very slim figure to look great on camera, and she was always a very thin, borderline underweight person. And you see that her great bone structure and her beautiful face from the second house and the eighth house, mainly in her D1 chart. Now, again, you don't see this in this chart, but I can tell you that her Saturn is in Rohini. And again, I have talked about Rohini more in depth in the video that I did on moon's nakshatras, or nakshatras of the moon. And I specifically mentioned about Rohini that, in fact, many of them are extremely good looking. And in particular, their eyes are their feature that stands out the most. And certainly Vivien Leigh was known probably most of all because she had those very stunning eyes. People who saw her in person said that her eye color was somewhere between blue and green and changed on, based on what she was wearing and whatever, lighting and all that stuff. And definitely her eye area definitely popped out, right? She had these really stunning, supposedly green eyes, at least in the part as Scarlett O'Hara, because Scarlett O'Hara in the book was supposed to have green eyes. And they really stood out. So her top area of the face really stood out. Her high cheekbones, so very good bone structure that captured the light and all that, which made her very, very attractive. And on top of that, she was known for her very youthful appearance. And when she took the job as Scarlett O'Hara, the role of Scarlett O'Hara, she was actually in her mid-20s and she was playing a teenager. And you again see this from the fact that she has Mercury in the 8th house. So Mercury in the 8th house is looking at the 2nd house, which is also it's the house of the face, right? So Saturn there and aspected by Mercury is very much in a good situation here. Saturn is in a friendly sign, and it's in a sign ruled by his friend Venus, right? And Taurus in Rohini. And then it's aspected by his other friend Mercury, which brings youthfulness. And it also brings that kind of top-heavy type of face shape that I talked about as well in Mercury ruled nakshatras. I talked about how Mercury generally brings the kind of top-heavy face, right? So the face where the first thing that stands out are the cheekbones, the eye area, and the jawline by comparison is a little bit slimmer. So it almost looks like an inverted triangle. And that definitely matched her physical appearance. That's pretty much her facial features, her bone structures. I'm also going to add some photos here in the video for you to see. So you can actually see here how it's being influenced by her planets, by her horoscope here, right? Her actual features I'm talking about here. And then also she had Sun in the 7th house, Sun looking at the Lagna, right? So Sun is the natural ruler of Leo, and it is the planet that is connected to theater, drama, and for good reason, because, the Sun gives a very royal, dignified appearance. It gives a kind of, again, an appearance that definitely adds to standing out from a crowd, right? Even though in her situation, Sun is not, in the happiest position, it's still looking at the Lagna and it's aspecting the physical appearance. The Sun also adds towards a fair complexion and light-colored eyes, generally, right? So in her situation, it's all really being shown here, right? And let me see if there are other things. Also having Moon in Shravana, again, I think added to her beauty. Moon in Capricorn, again, Moon is the face as well. So the Moon influences the face as well. And she has Moon in Shravana, in the nakshatra of Shravana, which again is ruled by the Moon, right? So it gives a feminine appearance, mysterious appearance, delicate, and also, it's in Capricorn, which again adds to having good bone structure, having a slim figure, well-defined features, very chiseled features. And again, this was, her appearance was pretty incredible considering that, she didn't have any cosmetic surgery. And, so it's not like nowadays where everyone can buy high cheekbones, right? All right, so let me see what else is going on here. Another thing that you see is Venus is falling. Let me see. Right, Venus is falling in Virgo, which makes it debilitated, which is interesting. Now here, this is not so much connected to her physical appearance. I would say this is connected to why she wanted to become an actress, because Venus is the ruler of Bharani, right? So her Lagna, nakshatra, and falling in debilitation, it shows that there must have been some kind of a complex there connected to her appearance. And in fact, I actually saw a documentary ages ago about her, and what really shocked me was that when she was young, she was actually quite she said some things that actually made her sound pretty low in self-confidence and, self-esteem about her appearance. I think she was like, some young man showed interest in her and she immediately wanted to marry him. And when her mother refused, she said something along the lines of, you have to let me marry him because nobody else is ever going to ask me, or something like that. And that was interesting, considering the fact that she was throughout her life known to be very good looking. So even when she was a child, other kids in school would call her very good looking and all this stuff. And she got her debut pretty early on in the theater. I think she was like 19 or 20. And she was always known to be a very good-looking woman, so it's interesting. And yeah, also I did hear, speaking of Venus being debilitated, Vivien Leigh was known to be quite seductive, and also it was largely blamed on her bipolar disorder and some mental illness, emotional instability, and all that. But she apparently had a tendency to be quite promiscuous and had a lot of affairs. And I also I did a video ages ago about Venus and promiscuity, and I talked about how women who have a damaged Venus, in this case debilitated Venus, the way that she had, oftentimes have a great deal of insecurity and seek to get external validation in order to feel attractive. And that oftentimes makes them fall into the trap of having a lot of affairs just for attention and validation. Now, this is speculation, of course, because nobody really knew what was going on in her head and why she was having affairs, but I can speculate that maybe it did have something to do with this. All right, so this is about her appearance from the D1 chart. Now, if you look at her D9 chart a little bit as well, what do you see in her D9 chart again? You see let me check if this is the right chart actually. Right. What you see if you look at her D9 chart again is, first of all, her ascendant falls in Libra in Swati Nakshatra, and it's containing Jupiter and Mercury. So again, you see the influence of Mercury on the ascendant in the D9, which would reinforce the youthful appearance, the cat-like appearance, the green eyes. Mercury gives a very youthful, kind of light on your feet, petite sort of figure as well. It could also explain why she was towards the short side, as well as the Ketu influence that can give a shorter frame. Also falling in Swati Nakshatra explains why she was so good at being a film actress. There were all these debates as well. I've seen this in the documentary about her, that she was basically better at being a film actress than her husband Laurence Olivier, who was basically dubbed as like the greatest actor in history, or one of the greatest actors in history. But Olivier was much better at being a theater actor. And because at the time when she started out in her career, cinema was not the most developed form of art, right? It was still pretty much in the early stages, right? Back then in the 1940s. But she was very good at it. Many people who saw her work, and, she also got an Oscar for playing Scarlett O'Hara. So people were impressed by how good she was at portraying herself on camera, of because apparently there's an entire technique of knowing how to present yourself and all this stuff. So she definitely had that. And Swati Nakshatra is one of those nakshatras, actually all of the Rahu dominant nakshatras, very much connected with being successful through electronic media. So, being successful through film, by showing yourself on camera and all of this stuff. So Swati is a nakshatra that shows up prominently in the charts of actors, right? And Mercury, again, that youthfulness, right? And the Jupiter just added probably, first of all, for her, an oval face could explain that. So her face was somewhere between heart-shaped, oval, and maybe an inverted triangle a little bit. Jupiter would bring the nice smile, would bring the oval face as well. And also this kind of just an energy of wiseness about her. She was actually known to be quite cultivated and intelligent. And let me see another thing. Also, you see again, Moon being in Taurus. Again, I think, let me check. So, falling in the nakshatra of Mrigashira, right? So it's falling in the nakshatra of Mrigashira, which is ruled by Mars. So this is where you see her more internal landscape, right? Because again, Moon being in Taurus will point out to being, beautiful, interested in beauty, interested in arts, because Taurus is ruled by Venus. You would also see, a pretty face, again, because Moon is healthy and it's in its best shape in the sign of Taurus. But being in Mrigashira would explain her strong willpower. She was a very strong-headed individual who pursued whatever she wanted in life. And because Mrigashira is ruled by Mars, so that shows a very, very independent person, and also a very sharp intellect, and she was certainly known to be very intelligent and perseverant as well. She would practice a lot on her lines. She was very much a perfectionist. She was, according to people who worked with her, really, really professional and, basically strategic. She had a kind of like a strategic way of thinking about how a character should come to life. And she was also well educated and spoke multiple languages. So she was definitely really an intelligent person, which would definitely be explained by Moon being in Mrigashira in the Navamsa, as well as her strong willpower, right? Also, another thing you see here is that Venus is in Leo conjunct Saturn, right? So the Lord of the Lagna of the Navamsa, which is Venus, is falling in Purva Falguni Nakshatra, which again is a nakshatra ruled by Venus. And it's very much connected to the arts, to sensuality, to beauty. And again, you see Venus, the ruler of her ascendant, is conjunct Saturn again, right? Saturn is, I think this is Magha Nakshatra, right? So in any case, they are both in the same sign, which is the sign of Leo. And again, Saturn being conjunct the Lord of the ascendant, and in the nakshatra of Purva Falguni, I mean, Venus being in Purva Falguni would explain the beauty, the good bone structure. Saturn in Magha as well. So Magha Nakshatra is a nakshatra connected to great fame, right? And acting profession as well. Many great actors, again, have strong Magha Nakshatra, which is ruled by Ketu. Again, you have a little bit of that Ketu energy which could reinforce the, frail, pale sort of appearance. So these are pretty much the general energies that you can pick up from her horoscope just by looking at how her horoscope would affect her actual physical appearance, her features, and all this stuff, and her energy to some extent. And if you look at the Arudha Lagna now, so the Arudha Lagna falls in Leo, and it's together with Ketu, right? This is where it gets interesting, because see, yes, she was very beautiful, but the things that people connected her to the most was that she was very, very attractive. So she would stand out in a crowd, and that is actually falling in line with having Arudha Lagna in Leo. Leo, again, is very much connected to, of course, the dramatic arts. It explains why she was able to create a very long-lasting, successful career in the arts, because people really saw her as belonging in this line of work because of her ascendant in Leo, her Arudha Lagna in Leo. I mean, and then the features, the way that she was described often when it came to her appearance was cat-like. You know, there were a lot of people saying that she had a cat-like smile, that, you know, with those high cheekbones, and her eyes were bright and all this stuff. So she always also seemed sunny and kind of, you know, I mean, at least in her major roles in her persona, you know, she was always with a smile on her face. She was a good entertainer in general. She was funny. And this was based on how people saw her, the people who knew her described her. And on top of that, Ketu being there is very interesting. She was obviously known for her very, very pale skin. And I remember again in this documentary that I saw about her, they asked a few people what they thought about Vivien Leigh, and multiple people, including Olivia de Havilland, who was her co-star as Melanie, referred to her as very fragile looking. You know, they said, in fact, I remember one time I read that Olivia de Havilland was asked what words she would associate to Vivien Leigh, and she said a porcelain cup. And then there was this other guy that worked with her or was on set during the production of Gone with the Wind or something, who said that she looked so fragile that you thought her neck was going to snap under the weight of her head, and she looked like a porcelain doll. So there were like repeated comments about how fragile she looked, how tiny, how dainty she looked, how she was ethereal and also exotic as well. These things very much fall in line with having Ketu in the Arudha Lagna in the best case scenario, right? So this is a good scenario of Ketu in the Arudha Lagna. I won't get into what are the more negative traits that people could project on you if you have this Ketu, but certainly in her case, because she was also good looking, she got the good side of the coin, as it were, when it came to her Arudha Lagna. So people projected their fantasies with respect to how ethereal she was, how dainty, how pretty. And I talked about this again in the video I did on Archetypes of Ketu, that a strong Ketu energy will give a fragile appearance. And especially in a woman's chart, it tends to give an aura of vulnerability, of femininity, of kind of fragility, basically. Because, you know, Ketu is very much connected to, like, you know, well, basically dead bodies. It's connected to dead bodies. There's no other way to put it. So you would expect Ketu to give, you know, a fragile, you know, kind of a almost weak, there's no other way to put it, sort of appearance. And people would often, the people who knew her better would say things like, she appeared to be very fragile and delicate, but she was actually tough as nails, you know, that her appearance was actually very deceptive. And that would make sense if you look at her Arudha Lagna versus her entire horoscope, right? What you see in the D1 and the D9 charts, sorry. But yeah, so these are the main. Let me see if there are other influences here. Let's see, where is the sun? Again, the sun falls in Libra, right? So again, more beauty. And also the sun this is interesting here, because she has the sun in the third house from the Arudha Lagna. And I talked about this more in depth in videos that I did about Arudha Lagna. The third house shows your personality and what your tendencies are and all this stuff. So the sun there explained her kind of a very dignified appearance. I remember again with respect to how she was perceived that Laurence Olivier said that even though she was such a small person, she was basically tiny and slim. She was a short woman and she weighed like, almost nothing. And basically she had this such a kind of imposing energy or something, like a very dignified or almost aristocratic sort of aura about her that kept people, sort of at a distance for most of the time because of the kind of royal, regal, sort of prideful energy that she gave off. And again, you kind of see this from the Arudha Lagna. Sun being there would explain a really prideful sort of energy, and definitely would explain why she was so right for portraying Scarlett O'Hara, because Scarlett O'Hara was the epitome of a very prideful individual who was, wouldn't bend for anyone and basically only did what she wanted. So yeah, this is really interesting, and this is pretty much what I wanted to say about Vivien Leigh. And also, let's not forget that because Ketu is in the Arudha Lagna, means Rahu is in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna. So kind of saw her and made audiences see her as, very rare, exotic, unusual looking as well. So here you have Ketu and Rahu kind of influencing the Arudha Lagna at the same time, in different ways. So yes, this would add to her general allure as well, right? And yeah, this is pretty much what I can say about Vivien Leigh. So I'm going to move on to another example in a bit. So let me move on to another example, Nicole Kidman. Now, this is another interesting example with respect to physical appearance and Arudha Lagna and the ascendant. And I chose her specifically because she has similar energies to Vivien Leigh in the sense that they both have Ketu influencing the ascendant. So in Nicole Kidman's case, she has Ketu in the ascendant of the D1 chart. As you can see on the screen, I'm going to put the chart of the D1. And you see Ketu right in the middle top square there with the number 7. That shows that her ascendant is in Libra and Ketu is sitting in the ascendant. She also has Neptune there if you are following tropical astrology. I don't really listen to Neptune much anymore. And in fact, when it comes to physical appearance, I think Ketu and Neptune actually have some similar energies. If you look at the descriptions for Neptune in tropical, they actually are similar to Ketu with respect to how they can influence physical appearance. So Ketu gives like this dreaminess, kind of otherworldliness, also tends towards a pale complexion, and also gives a fragile appearance. So in her case, you see that, again, beautiful appearance because ascendant in Libra. Hold on, because I don't remember exactly where her ascendant was. Let me see. Right, so I think it's Swati Nakshatra. Which would make sense again. Because, like I said, Swati is connected to, it's Swati Nakshatra. So Swati is connected to media, success in movies and TV and everything that has to do with media. So you see a lot of, famous people, celebrities, models, artists in today's world, and not just today's world, but since the invention of cinema, who have prominent placements in Swati Nakshatra, in actually all of the Rahu dominant Nakshatra, basically, and also strong Rahu energy, because Rahu is about technology, but I won't get into this philosophy right now. But yeah, you see especially Swati, Ardra, Sastabisha Nakshatras that show up prominently in the charts of people who become very successful in the media, right? So, and also Swati is known for being quite seductive, attractive. They're sensuous as well, and it's falling in Libra as well. So that shows beauty. And then you see the second house is Moon in Scorpio. So her moon, let me see. Her moon is in Jyeshta, which makes sense for a number of reasons, but I'm not going to get into it right now. I talked about Jyeshta in Mercury's nakshatras if you want to learn more about it. So yeah, you can see, maybe you can see what I see here with respect to Nicole Kidman and why that figures that she would have prominent Jyeshta placements. And so Jyeshta, first of all, can give a very pretty face. I've seen this a lot. Like, actually, Jyeshta moon gives really pretty faces, like with women. The moon and the ascendant as well. But it also shows a very driven personality, and also can give that a bit of an inverted triangle. She has that a little bit. Now, to be fair, Nicole Kidman has also had a lot of plastic surgery. So if you look at pictures of her, I'm going to try to find pictures of her when she was younger as well. You know, she looked a little bit different when she was starting out, but she was clearly very pretty from the beginning, and you see that with moon being in the second house from her ascendant. So moon being in the second house reinforces a very feminine face, very feminine, dreamy, pretty, again, tends towards fairness in colors. So if, again, within the limits of your genetic inheritance. So fairness means, you know, brighter skin, light colored eyes, light colored hair. So she's a natural redhead, and she has blue eyes and very fair skin, which of course is also further emphasized by having Ketu in the Lagna, which I have talked about again in depth in Archetypes of Ketu. I did a video specifically about Ketuvians, and I said that Ketu tends to bring this kind of very super pale complexion. All right, so this is with respect to her appearance. Let me see what else is going on here. Let's see her Venus, right? Oh, this is interesting. So she has Venus conjunct Jupiter. Let me see. Venus is, I think, in Ashlesha. Let me see. Yes, Venus is in Ashlesha, which is very seductive. A lot of actresses who are known for their beauty and seductiveness have prominent Ashlesha placements. I will say this. So she has Venus in Ashlesha conjunct Jupiter, which is, let me see, in Pushya. Pushya, which is ruled by Saturn, which again has to do with, also Pushya is another placement that shows up in the horoscopes of attractive actresses and singers. I think Kylie Minogue has ascended in Pushya. I'm not sure if Marilyn Monroe had ascended in Pushya. I think it's possible. And also Angelina Jolie has ascended in Pushya. So it tends to give a very kind of sensuous, feminine appearance a lot of the times, you know. But in her case, it only very slightly affects her appearance because it's conjunct. So Jupiter is in Pushya, and it is conjunct the lord of her ascendant, which is Venus. But what I wanted to say is, right off the bat, having Jupiter conjunct the lord of your ascendant puts you in the tall side, right? Especially since she also has some Saturn there with the Pushya, right? Jupiter is in Pushya, it's ruled by Saturn. So that already kind of shows, you know, Saturn and Jupiter, both of them are connected to having a tall, slender figure. And she also has, like I said, Venus in Ashlesha gives that graceful, you know, like a snake kind of, because Ashlesha is connected to Nagas, which are kind of like snakes, but they're like deities in the shapes of snakes. And I've also read this before, and I've heard it also from other astrologers before, that Ashlesha is one of the nakshatras that show good dancers because they have a very kind of graceful way of moving, you know, because they're connected to the snake as well. And so it makes sense, you know, for her, because she has that tall, slender body. She has a very small body frame, even though she's very tall. And she definitely has that gracefulness. I think she had parts where she was dancing, like in Moulin Rouge. So it definitely matches her energy, you know, physically. And I mean, actually, her physical body and her the energy she gives off, sure, to some extent, and her face and features and everything, right? So if you look at her D9 a little bit, let me see. You have, now to be fair, I haven't, I mean, I have at some point, but I don't see them here. I don't see the nakshatras here because I haven't checked in the calculator anyway. But you can see that she has Lagna in Taurus in the D9, which already shows, again, beauty, right? Taurus is ruled by Venus again. So this definitely reinforces that beautiful, graceful appearance, right? Because Taurus and Libra are the two signs ruled by Venus, and Venus is all about arts and beauty and harmony and harmonious features, right? And then what else you see is that the lord of her Lagna, Venus, is in Capricorn, conjunct the moon and Ketu, again Ketu, which reinforces the fact that she is very pale. Basically, if you have Ketu connected to Lagna, both in the D1 and the D9, you're just, you're probably gonna, very likely, let me put it like that, gonna inherit the palest, like, complexion possible within your gene pool, right? And also Ketu gives that, gracefulness, that petiteness, delicate features, feminine features as well, because she also has moon here, right? So she has this kind of very dreamy, feminine, energy. I mean, I don't think anyone would ever see Nicole Kidman playing Xena or something like that, right? She was always like this very feminine, dainty kind of presence. So that makes sense. And again, it falls in the sign of Capricorn. And like I mentioned, similarly to Vivien Leigh, Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, and the Saturn energy generally gives good bone structure, tends to give, people who are photogenic, especially since she has Venus in Capricorn, right? Which Venus is the planet of beauty, and it beautifies everything that it touches. So it beautifies the sign of Capricorn here, giving, a tall, slender figure, a slim figure, graceful appearance, good bone structure, pretty features, all of that. Now, to be fair, yes, Nicole Kidman has also enhanced her appearance through surgery. Good for her, no judgment. But she was always naturally beautiful. And you can see that if you Google pictures of her from the beginning of her career. So this is what her horoscope shows. So far in her D1 and D9, with respect to her appearance, you see the influence of Venus, you see the influence of Saturn, you see the influence of beauty and seductiveness and petiteness and grace, because you have Ketu there, right? And also that kind of ethereal sort of energy, also paleness, right? So, and if you look at the Arudha Lagna, her Arudha Lagna falls in Capricorn. I've marked it with AL on her D1 chart, which I'm going to be showing here on the screen. And she has Arudha Lagna in Capricorn, and she has Saturn in the third from the Arudha Lagna. If you've watched any of my videos on the Arudha Lagna, I said how the third house from the Arudha Lagna shows how people perceive your general energy, how you go about doing things, your personality, right? Your modus operandi, like your MO, right? What is your general way of doing things? And having Saturn, so a lot of Saturn energy in the Arudha Lagna makes her come across as very reserved, very cold almost, right? Because Capricorn is very professional, it's very strategic. It's also Saturn in the third could make her come across sneaky, which I think she kind of does, like, at least that's my impression. And she also played characters sometimes who were kind of like sneaky and deceptive. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with her Arudha Lagna. Having Saturn there, people might tend to think of her as capable of deception, capable of strategies of all kind. And it's furthermore emphasized by having Saturn opposite Mars from the Arudha Lagna, right? So she has Saturn in Pisces, opposite Mars in Virgo. If you look at it from the Arudha Lagna perspective. So Mars falls, and this is another interesting thing, because Mars falls in the 9th house from the Arudha Lagna. And again, if you've watched the videos that I did in detail about every sign, I told you that the ninth house from the Arudha Lagna shows what class of people will support you in life. And having Mars there shows that men in general are going to support her in life, which makes sense because she's a very attractive woman, right? So her audience predominantly are going to be men. Right? So as long as which maybe is why instinctively she never even tried to, I don't know, let's say play a very feminist role or anything like that, because she would definitely get more support by being, for lack of a better way of explaining it, catering to the male gaze, you know what I mean? Like, because having Mars there in the ninth from the Arudha Lagna definitely shows that she is eye candy, right? To young men especially. Mars shows men who are not married, men who are sometimes not even marriage minded, right? So Mars can show also male peers, so in your profession, for instance, it shows that men are going to be on your side or they're going to help your career somehow. And of course, in a woman's chart, Mars also shows boyfriends, right? So boyfriends can help you. But it's different from the husband archetype, so I'm not going to get into that. But you also see, actually, ironically, but, I didn't want to get into like a full Arudha Lagna analysis, but these things are standing out, so I think I'm going to say them. But she has Venus conjunct Jupiter in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna. Oh, man. And also Jupiter rules the 12th from her Arudha Lagna, right? If you look at her chart, she has... so her Arudha Lagna is in Capricorn, and you see there behind with the number 9, that's Sagittarius. So the 12th house is a Sagittarius, and the 12th house lord, Jupiter, is opposite the Arudha Lagna, which shows that both her direct enemies and her hidden enemies are literally her husband. Like her husband. So I hope she's okay in her marriage right now. I don't know. But yeah, and also, okay, I'm gonna shut up because I saw something here about circumstances of death, but I'm gonna shut up about this topic because I know people didn't sign up for hearing about death in this video. But I have talked about how Arudha Lagna can connect to circumstances of death in other videos, so you can go and search my channel. All right, so, but I can see that her husband archetype is the people who are challenging, and not just that, being signified by Jupiter, not just her husbands could be enemies or people who confront you directly, women as well, right? She has Venus opposite the Arudha Lagna, which on the one hand, again, actually helps her, but also hinders her in some way, because it helps her in the sense that Venus from opposite the Arudha Lagna is looking at the Arudha Lagna. So it adds to her charm and her beauty, and also adds to how people would easily see her as a siren, as an artist, right? Someone who could thrive in the artistic field, because otherwise, if let's say she wouldn't have had Venus in the 7th looking at the Arudha Lagna, it would have been pretty difficult to branch out into an artistic field with so much Capricorn energy on the Arudha Lagna, right? Maybe she would have done better in politics or, I don't know, working in administration. But having that Venus energy there in an area that is very visible, and I talked about this in other videos, when you have planets in the Kendra houses, which is you see the inner square, those are the Kendra houses, right? The 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th houses. These, if you have planets there, those are the ones that are the most influential with respect to how you come across and what energies people project on you, right? So if you have a certain planet in that, you have to, if you go for profession signified by that planet, you will have an easier time getting support in that area because people will naturally see you as belonging in that particular field, right? Just as a parenthesis. So on the one hand, it is helping her, but on the other hand, it shows that young women, unmarried women, or rather women who are not mothers, that's what Venus signifies, are going to be her direct opposition, which probably, I don't know if that makes sense because I haven't studied her life. I don't know if she's ever complained about anything, but I'm sure, again, being a young, beautiful woman in Hollywood, maybe she has had competitions with other women. I think that's quite reasonable to expect, especially since she came up in a time when, Hollywood was way more chauvinistic than it is now, if that is even possible. Like, so, and on the other hand, she has that Jupiter energy, which again makes her come across as benevolent, as wise, as, intelligent, and also can make her seem a good teacher, patient, good with children, for instance, and also a good orator, right? Jupiter is about teaching somehow. So this is, I think this matches her image. But again, it's interesting to see that if you look at her image overall, the Arudha Lagna is actually more strongly connected to how she is perceived than the actual physical characteristics. And that was my whole point with this video, was to show that, physical characteristics are one thing, and the general energies that people associate with you and your name and your image and what you are known for, that's a totally different thing. And this second different thing is more clearly shown in astrology through the Arudha Lagna. And she also has, if you notice, Moon in the 11th house from the Arudha Lagna, which is a sign of great success, gains, right? The 11th house shows gains from, again, it's interesting because, like, on the one hand, she has, like, Venus opposition. So younger women are competition, but motherhood and mothers are something that she might gain from. She could easily make friends with mothers as well, or playing mothers, another thing. And she actually, if you think about it, I think she has played, well, maybe not persistently, but she has definitely played some mothers as well. She has also Ketu in the 10th house from the Arudha Lagna. So this shows that she has a very mysterious kind of energy about her career or something. Her career would lend to something like being a chameleon, right? Maybe the Neptune being there is also playing a part. To be honest, I couldn't say because I haven't studied Neptune's energy that much, influence that much on the Arudha Lagna. But like I said, Ketu and Neptune can have similar energies. They create this kind of like a mysterious sort of fog, a nebulous sort of energy where people cannot quite put their finger on you and, cannot associate you with very clear personality qualities. And I would say that Ketu in the 10th house, I've actually seen this, I think, in Russell Crowe's chart as well. And a bunch of other actors who have like Ketu in the 10th from the Arudha Lagna, or they have Ketu prominently placed, or maybe in the Arudha Lagna. And they're very successful actors. And I think that's because of Ketu's ability to, be kind of a chameleon and, take on different energies, because even in astrology, Ketu and Rahu are very easily influenced by the planets that they sit next to, or the planets that are governing the sign that they're sitting in, right? So they will give that kind of energy. So maybe in this case, especially since her Ketu is in Libra, again, it falls back to Venus and Jupiter, right? Because she has the Lord of the 10th house from the Arudha Lagna is Venus and it's conjunct Jupiter. That would definitely aid her again in having a career in the arts. So, yes, this is pretty much what I wanted to say about Nicole Kidman. So, yet another example that I want to look at is Angelina Jolie. Now, I think I have talked about her before a little bit in the Arudha Lagna in Scorpio video, or Scorpio as Arudha Lagna. And she does have Scorpio as Arudha Lagna. That's why I use her as an example. But I want to start by looking at her D1 and her D9 charts, just as I did with the other examples, because I want to see the physical appearance, how it's being influenced by the planets. Now, I will start by saying, let me see. I need to find the chart. All right, so first of all, the first thing that we see in her chart is she has Venus in the ascendant, or Venus in the Arudha Lagna. As I have mentioned also in the general description, Venus in the ascendant tends to show up a lot in the charts of very beautiful women and men, people who are generally known as being very good looking. It also can make a person be just a tad narcissistic sometimes, especially with respect to women. I also mentioned this in the general description. And I did make a small mistake. I think I said that she also has Venus in the D9 chart, but she doesn't. Or actually, depending on which calculator I used, which is very interesting, she actually does have Venus in the ascendant in the D9 chart. So, yeah, I'm a little bit confounded here. Because one calculator puts her Venus in the ascendant, another calculator doesn't. So, I'm gonna stick with the theory that she does have Venus in the ascendant, to be honest. Because that would really make a lot of sense with respect to her, general personality and the way that she has developed after midlife or after marriage. In her case, she actually got married for the first time very young. So I think she was in her early 20s when she got married for the first time. So you would expect the Navamsa to already be activated early on in life because she got married so young. So, but starting with the Venus in the ascendant, right? So she is clearly known for her beauty. And again, Angelina Jolie, like many other actors, just like Nicole Kidman, has had plastic surgery. But even before that, she was very good looking. There are pictures of her ever since, she was a teenager. She definitely had very nice features, beautiful lips, and she was definitely known for her sensuality, which is typical for Venus, by the way, but for her, it's furthermore emphasized because she has Arudha Lagna in Scorpio, which I will be getting to after I tackle the purely physical aspects shown by her chart. So, let's see. She has Venus in the ascendant in Cancer in Pushya. So that already shows a strong sensuous energy. There's also something very kind of, Pushya is a very nurturing energy, right? So it's seen as kind of like, think of, I don't know, lush meadows or something. It's something very mothering as well. And it's very kind of, has this energy of self-sacrifice actually, which proved to be, definitely the path that she has taken in life, because she ended up, working for charities, working for refugees, getting involved with all of these, I think UNHCR, or what is it called? Sorry. So these organizations that basically fight for human rights, right? So she definitely took that path of service of the greater good, which definitely falls in line with that Pushya energy of nurturing others, serving others. But early on, with respect to how she was perceived, it added to her overall, sensuality and being perceived as very good looking. And then you have Moon is conjunct Jupiter and Mars. Now, this is particularly interesting because she has had a personality. Her personality, first of all, was very how should I put it, very strong, or she was definitely standing out because of her personality and her opinions and the fact that she was outspoken about a lot of things. She also became known as quite wise, a lot of people started to respect her more, especially after she got involved in, traveling and refugees and all this stuff. And of course, as you can see, the Lord of her ascendant, which is the Moon, is falling in the ninth house, which is the house of travel. And then it's also in Pisces, which is furthermore faraway travel. And Pisces in Revati, in her case. I talked about Revati more in detail in the video that I did on Mercury's nakshatras. I talked about how Revati creates some of the most beautiful, exotic-looking people. So a lot of really good-looking people have Revati energies, especially, connected to the ascendant, connected to the moon, because these are the body, the face, the head. The ascendant rules the head and the body overall. So then you see that she has a moon conjunct Mars, conjunct Jupiter. So she was also known as kind of an action person. That is explained by the Lord of her Lagna being conjunct Mars. So she does have, and had at least, I don't know about nowadays, but she did have when she started out a pretty athletic sort of aura. She was, she was in those Tomb Raider, movies. She was quite, known to be quite tough and able to play the action hero. And so you see that masculine energy from Mars being conjunct Moon, and also Jupiter, and also in Pisces, connected to travel and adventure, right? So, and Jupiter would give her the above average height. Mars would give her the athletic allure and the strong body, good muscle mass, strong shoulders. And also for a woman, Moon is the breasts. And generally, I've actually read this a long time ago, that Moon conjunct Mars tends to produce nice breasts. And also conjunct Jupiter means that they are above average in size. So I guess this would be a bonus point as well in her appearance. And let's see what else is going on here. You have Saturn is in the 12th house. Let's see, 7, 8. Right. Saturn also aspects her Moon, Mars, and Jupiter by 10th aspect. So she also has that touch of Saturn. She has multiple touches of Saturn, actually, because, already her ascendant is connected to Pushya, which is ruled by Saturn. So there's that Saturnian energy. And now you have Saturn aspecting her Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. Saturn is also aspecting her second house, the house that rules the face, by third aspect in her D1 chart, if you can, by third aspect, right? So Saturn is in Gemini, it's aspecting Leo. And this shows that, what I said in Vivien Leigh's case, and in fact, again, I didn't want to get into this, but I think I said it a little bit. Maybe I'm going to do a separate video at some point, but the reason why you oftentimes see Saturnians and Rahuvians being, seen as beauty idols or sex symbols or whatever you want to call them, in today's world and for the past roughly 1 century, is because of the fact that we are in the age of Aquarius. So the beauty ideal is heading towards that Aquarian energy, which is ruled by Saturn and Rahu, right? So the people who are, it's not a coincidence that, we have models, and the modeling business started, worshiping very thin women, tall, thin women about, more than half a century ago. About 70 years ago, actually, probably it started, right? It was a huge shift from, up until that point, until roughly World War II, the kind of women that were seen as the most attractive were not the thin women, right? On average, they were not the thinnest women. They were the women who were curvy and voluptuous and all that. But now it's really shifting more, and has been shifting more towards thin, the thin ideal, and everything is about how contoured the face is, right? So you want to see people with strong bone structure, like high cheekbones and hollow cheekbones, and their bones are showing and the muscles are showing. So you see people with very little body fat as worship as gorgeous, and beautiful. And this is all about Saturn and Aquarius, right? If you would have been, this is why in the past, when the age of Pisces was more dominant, the women that were the most attractive were the ones who were plump, right? If you look at paintings made by, I don't know who, there were a bunch of these, painters in the past who would paint obese women as very attractive. They were like the epitome of attractiveness, right? In any case, right, kind of a parenthesis, but you oftentimes see Saturn aspecting the ascendant or the moon in the charts of people who are very good looking, or seen as very good looking nowadays, right? Because Saturn will produce a good bone structure. It tends to make the person slimmer naturally, or it makes the person slimmer, or it also sometimes produces, unfortunately, a tendency towards eating disorders. It also produces a tendency to be hyper-controlling, especially in her case, since Saturn is aspecting the moon. The moon is about appetite and the stomach, right? And if I'm not mistaken, I think I did see ages ago a show about her that said that she did struggle with anorexia when she was a teenager. And later on, when she started out, the irony was that when she started out in her career, there was... she tried to get some modeling jobs, and someone said that she was too fat or something, which is ridiculous, because if the data that has been given about her weight, and even if you look at her, it's accurate. She was always kind of like borderline underweight, really. She had never been anywhere close to fat. But this is just to show you how in today's world, thinness is so worshipped that, even someone who's borderline underweight is not thin enough according to, the standards of Hollywood or the standards of the modeling agencies or whatever. So in any case, and certainly in her case, because she has that Pushya energy, she has that strong moon energy, it will give a tendency to look sort of round, and even if she's not fat, which she wasn't, right? She had this, especially early on in life before she started getting surgeries, she was pretty round faced, had this really plump cheeks and like, those very full lips, which were certainly her best feature, at least that were her distinguishing feature, let's say. And when she got older, she adjusted the rest of her appearance. According to what I saw, is that she had multiple surgeries to thin out her face, to basically, bring it more in line with that Saturnian energy. So in any case, it does show, however, the good bone structure, which she always had, right? The high cheekbones, the strong jawline. And again, strong jawline is also shown by Mars aspecting the moon. I talked about this. Jupiter conjunct the moon, oval face as well. Above average height, like I said. Also, Jupiter conjunct moon, ironically, and especially since it's in Pisces, does show a tendency towards plumpness. So it's a good thing that she has Saturn aspecting it, because probably if she didn't have that Saturn, she would have easily dealt with weight problems, because depending on maybe if it were in a different sign, that would have increased the appetite and all that for food. It would have been more difficult for her to keep her weight down. So in any case, you can definitely see, first of all, repeated themes that show aesthetic beauty, right? A lot of beauty here. And so this is just the D1 chart. So looking at the D9, which is controversial in her case, so I don't know, I've looked at different calculators, like I said. I don't even know if I'll be showing the chart on the screen because it's interesting. So one of them puts her Mars in the D9, another one puts Venus in the D9, so that's interesting. But again, like I said, I would stick to the Venus in the D9 in the Lagna because that makes more sense as far as I see it. And so according to the one calculator that I used, her ascendant in the D9 is in Leo and Venus is in Leo in Magha Nakshatra. So this makes a lot of sense already because, as again, similarly to what I said about Vivien Leigh, when I talked about Leo, not when I talked about her Lagna in the D9, Leo, of course, is connected to drama and arts, and especially dramatic arts, but all kinds of creative fields, right? So first of all, Leo shows a person who's very royal, has a certain status, is someone who stands out, is well known, famous. Magha, again, Nakshatra is very much connected to fame, So having Venus in the D9 Lagna already would further emphasize the fact that she is very good looking, right? Very good looking. So objectively speaking, I don't think anyone would say, oh, this woman's ugly, right? So she is very good looking, right? This is with respect to her physical appearance, and she has traditionally feminine features, right? Because there's a lot of Venus around her ascendant. And here you also see, let's see, Sun is in Punarvasu in Gemini. So you also have that Gemini energy. So this is really interesting because, I'm not going to talk about this because it's connected to marriage, so it's not really relevant. So anyway, so she has her Sun in Gemini, which would bring also the touch of youthfulness. And she also has Moon and Mars opposite the Lord of the Ascendant. So opposite the Sun in the Lagna. So again, you see the energy of Moon and Mars, right? And Moon and Mars are in Sagittarius in the D9, which again further emphasizes her desire for travel, for adventure. It also shows that she has an inherently masculine energy, right? The D9 is basically, like I said, looking at your D1 chart through the magnifying glass or looking through a microscope and seeing what else is going on. So like it's actually closer to your source energy, your spiritual energy. So if you see the moon in the D9, it's actually it's closer to the real you than the moon in the D1, right? It's showing you more details about who you really are, what really motivates you. And having moon conjunct Mars in Sagittarius would definitely explain her personality, right? So she is inherently has very strong masculine energy with that moon, and also this strong desire for adventure and action, and also helping others, because Sagittarius is a very kind of connected to Jupiter, therefore connected to being wise and being generous, being kind, helping the world, so it's about getting out of your comfort zone. And she also has this Jupiter energy on her ascendant, again, because you have this Sagittarius energy. So again, it would be reinforcing having a tendency to have a muscular build. Again, further reinforces the face is quite squarish. And certainly if you look at pictures of her when she was younger, her face was even more square, more like a square, I think, or round, somewhere between a round and a square. Whereas later on, she had some surgeries to make her face more elongated, right? And that would actually fall hand in hand with having this strong Mars energy, having Mars conjunct Moon, both in the D9 and in the D1 charts. It shows this face that is very ruled by Mars. So very strong masculine features, which would include a strong jawline. And yeah, and also you see Saturn again is aspecting the ascendant from the third, right? Saturn is in Kritika in the D9 chart, and it's aspecting her. No, wait. It's not aspecting her ascendant. I take that back. It's actually aspecting the sign of Cancer, not the sign of Leo. So let me check something else though. If you want to stretch it also, not stretch it, it is something to look at. The ruler of her ascendant in the D9, which is Ketu, is falling in Pisces. If I'm not mistaken, Uttara Bhadrapada, let me check. Yes, in Uttara Bhadrapada. So this again gives a little bit of Saturn energy as well, because Uttara Bhadrapada is ruled by Saturn. And again, it gives also this kind of a, first of all, the beauty. Uttara Bhadrapada is a nakshatra that is connected to beauty and grace, and again, dancing also. I don't know if she's a good dancer, but I would not be surprised if she doesn't care about dancing with all the Mars energy in her chart. However, it does give a sculpted appearance, right? It gives the good bone structure, the photogenic, the telegenic sort of energy, right? And also this composure, like this self-control, basically. A kind of a cool energy, right? Cool, calm, and collected. So this is what you get about her appearance from the D1 and the D9. Now, if you look at her Arudha Lagna, this is where it gets interesting. See, remember, this is what her energy was with respect to her appearance, her general personality, and certainly these things started to come out more and more as people got to know her. But remember when she first started out, like I also mentioned in that video on Scorpio as Arudha Lagna, she was very much known as dark and seductive, and even later on when she, dated Brad Pitt and whatever, people were saying that she was a witch, that she was using her sexuality to seduce men, and all this stuff. That's because her Arudha Lagna falls in Scorpio. And she always gave off and certainly early on in her career, she actually, really, I think, like I said in that video, just knew that this is what would get her attention, and this is what people kind of bought into. In fact, I saw a documentary about her that from a young age, she was into the goth fashion and, went through a dark phase and all this stuff. She was open about self-injury and all this stuff, which, by the way, self-injury makes a lot of sense for someone who has Moon conjunct Mars, especially both in the D1 and the D9 charts. But again, I digress. But in any case, she has Arudha Lagna in Scorpio, which would feed people's fantasies about how she's dark and seductive and sexual and, maybe even a little bit of a witch. And on top of that, she has Rahu in the Arudha Lagna. And early on in her career, the thing that everyone was talking about was how unusual looking she was. So certainly people were, seeing her as very good looking. But the thing that really catapulted her to mass fame was the fact that she looked very unusual for the time. So there was nobody who looked like her, who had those particular features and had those very full lips. And so it was her unique appearance that actually brought her the mass fame. And there was all this and even now I think there are women who are getting surgeries to look like her. I remember one time ages ago when I was in high school, because she was still at the height of her fame back then, and I would read in women's magazines that in many places in the world, women were going to plastic surgeons asking to look like her, right? To get those lips or those. And she certainly sparked this whole frenzy about women getting lip fillers and stuff to look like her, to emulate her. And this was definitely what catapulted her to fame. And you definitely see this in the Arudha Lagna. The fact that she came across not just as, strange and seductive, and her appearance was very unusual. She was perceived as very unusual. She was also kind of seen as a rebel without a cause as well, which is very much in line with the Rahu energy, right? You're always someone who's unorthodox, who's challenging the status quo, saying things that are outrageous, doing things that are outrageous. So people always saw her as kind of like this weirdo, who's who was just completely out of the norm, and was just, and a lot of the times people would say, oh, she's just doing things to provoke, to shock, or anything like that. And, but that was basically people projecting their stuff, projecting that she was this crazy person, this wild woman, because of this Scorpio Arudha Lagna with Rahu in it. And not only that, she also has Sun, Ketu, and Mercury opposite the Arudha Lagna. So you have Sun and Mercury energy there. Ketu, of course, is always opposite Rahu, so it's like it's a byproduct. But the main energy that is transpiring from her Arudha Lagna is the Rahu, because that's the one that is sitting in the Arudha Lagna. But then you also have the Sun and Mercury energies, which are adding to, first of all, getting attention. Sun is about, again, dramatic arts, like I said, so it definitely helped her in becoming successful as an actor, having Sun in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna, which is looking at the Arudha Lagna. And then you have Mercury as well, which is about someone who's a good communicator, who's intelligent, who learns quickly. And I think that definitely transpired also in the roles that she had, someone who's very self-sufficient, but also quite sophisticated. I mean, I also talked this again in the Arudha Lagna video that I did on Scorpio, that she played spies, she played detectives and all of these things, which are very much connected to Scorpio, but they could also be connected to Mercury as well, because, and she's a person who is actually not particularly educated formally, but she has played these really sophisticated characters, right? Who had all kinds of intense trainings and stuff, which definitely, again, is being supported by her Arudha Lagna. And another thing that I would say is, again, you have the Lord of the Arudha Lagna. It's also worth looking at, right? So you still have the Moon and Jupiter, which would explain Moon and Jupiter conjunct Mars, right? So which would explain why people see her as kind of a Mother Teresa as well, right? So they see her as someone who is definitely, so her tendency to, oh my God, another ambulance. I'm sorry, I live not far away from the county hospital, so I thought this was a nice area when I moved. Again, they're doing their job. God bless. So where was I? So having Moon and Jupiter again would reinforce this image that, okay, she's dark and dangerous and sexy and all that, but she also has this kind, motherly sort of energy, because you have that Moon energy there. Feminine, kind and generous with the Jupiter. So, it's like people can also trust that she has a soft side, basically, with this energy, right? And then you have, again, the co-ruler of the Arudha Lagna, which is Ketu. conjunct Sun and Mercury, which again further reinforces all of the previously mentioned characteristics that I mentioned, right? So, meaning that, you know, she comes across as someone who's good at arts, creative, you know, has a strong presence. Sun just has this really strong presence that says, I'm here, look at me, you know, because it's like connected to Leo. Think of a cat that is like just, you know, everyone stops when there's a cat in the room and oh my God, it's so cute, right? Because like that's the energy that the Sun embodies. Like, I know I'm fabulous. I don't need you to tell me otherwise, you know? So this is why the Sun is very, very beneficial for someone who wants to be in the limelight all the time, right? People look at you if you have strong Sun energy. All right, so this is pretty much what I wanted to say, and wow, this has been a really, really long video. I've recorded multiple pieces, so yeah, hopefully I will manage to upload. All right, so thank you very much for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notifications bell if you want to see when I post a new video. Also, please comment in the comment section with anything you would care to share, any feedback you would like to give, ideas for future topics you would like me to see cover. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics with respect to natal astrology as well as relationship astrology. And you can check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. If you want to message me, I will give you more information about what readings I offer, prices, and so on and so forth. And also, last but not least, I have started a tarot channel more recently than this one, and I will be linking it in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. So, if you're interested in tarot, go ahead and check it out. Maybe subscribe to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, so thank you very much for listening. Bye.